Hit record. Are you anticipating anybody else?
I think John is missing, correct?
Okay.
Jackie, I presume.
Jackie, yes, of course. Jackie too. She was supposed to
We heard
be
you
here.
talk about bicycles with her.
Yeah, right. Well, let me see. So let me just make sure I got the right button to promote someone. Press on the three dots,
Let
right?
me, I need to make you, or,
Co-host or host? Co-host.
yeah. So right now you'll see panelists, the three dots, you can push someone back to attendee, but there's no attendees in there to promote.
Okay, let's see who's missing here. Who's Kevin Tierney?
Good question.
I'm a precinct H town meeting member and I'm just lurking.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Nice to
here's
meet you. Hi, Kevin.
Jackie.
Oh yeah, let's get her in. And she's attendee now, correct?
She's now a panelist.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Something happened.
Yeah,
Two
she
people
did.
got, some people moved. Robbie's on the line. He's not. And Jackie are both listed as panelists right now, attendees, sorry.
They should be coming through.
Excellent. Jackie and Robbie, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. I think we'll get started. This is recording. Yes, Cecilia?
Yep, it's recording now.
Great. We'll get started. Appreciate
So-
your help.
Yep,
We'll
I'm gonna
put it up.
make you the host and then I will pop off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our final meeting here. And just as a update, I did send you a copy of the latest iteration of our spreadsheet on the 5 points that we had made. In that we had planned at our last meeting to go through the final 2 points and with whatever additions that we could do, and then spend a good chunk of the second half of the meeting talking. Jackie will take over and discuss some ideas about the action 3. So, and then finally, I think very important to do before we stop at the end is that we had discussed coming up with a list of point people, which we don't have to have a long discussion here, but groups of people or people that we consider important to be engaged in these important actions going forward, so that we can sort of be up and running with some of these important projects to go. So all of that, I hope, makes sense. Any questions about what I've just said? Okay, great. So I have the spreadsheet, which we had gotten to sort of halfway through action 3. And, Jackie, why don't we take a few minutes now, because we didn't really get a chance to finish that. And if you want to go ahead and take over, let's sort of talk at length about your thoughts about action 3 and a bike network and how to proceed with that. And let's do that for the next 15 minutes, if that's okay with you.
Hey, Paul,
Michael?
just
Yes?
before you do that, if you could, somewhere in your, but I just wanted to ask you and talk about at some point this
Yeah.
distinction between infrastructure program, the urgency column, and what it means in terms of what happens with these things afterward. So if you could, before we finish, talk about that.
Yeah, so that's column D specifically, and column G, I think you're referring to.
No, I mean, I understand what G and D, E are, but F, we have this urgency and the type of action. And I'm just trying to understand, what do those words mean to the committee and to what they do with this stuff?
Mm.
Okay.
You don't have to do it
yeah.
now, we can do it, after. I
Sure.
just want to make sure I want to understand what happens to these things once we move them forward, what these words mean.
Right. Yep. Okay, we can discuss that too. That comes from the state. That's their sort of template, but yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, Jackie, do you want to start off?
Sure. I recall talking about this some at last meeting, so I'm just now looking at the attachment to see if anything has changed. I think for the point before, it's kind of interesting, this is infrastructure program outreach promotion. So I'm also curious kind of like what happens now, because it is a couple actions like in one. So I wouldn't want just one thing to happen and then have people think like, okay, we fulfilled it, but I don't know. I don't remember. Are we limited to 5? Is that our?
No. I mean, you could call this one action 3A and 3B if you wanted to, but
Okay.
I got the impression from what we had discussed that kind of one flowed from another. And so it's, part of it's promotion, but then part of it's
Yeah.
having an infrastructure. So they,
Yep.
kind of go together,
And then I sent around, so I would really love just to open it up and get people's thoughts and reactions. I also sent around a guide that I had come across that's, a Canadian-based consulting guide, but it was pretty comprehensive in terms of just talking through kind of the benefits of quick build and the different ways to do it and materials and costs. And so, I just wanted to provide more flavor to kind of what's meant by quick build versus not wanting the town to interpret this, that they're now reconstructing every single roadway, which is just not feasible and won't, happen on any immediate, time frame. So yeah,
Does anyone in the group need a 2-minute primer on the concept of quick build? And Jackie could do that if you want. Anyone?
I wouldn't mind having that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Sure. So quick build is a newer concept, I would say a newer, widely adopted concept that historically with transportation, everything would kind of go from what you have today to a 20-year planning design, $20 million roadway reconstruction project. And there's been a huge effort in the transportation industry to, and really driven by, communities to realize change quicker. So quick build, it's also called sometimes tactical, or sometimes it's seen as temporary or as a pilot. There's a lot of different kind of words out there. But effectively, quick build is using materials like asphalt, concrete, paint, bollards, planters, flex posts, rubber mats. And there's now a whole slew of kind of growing list of materials that communities are using to effectively change their streetscape quicker, cheaper. And sometimes they serve in like a permanent role. So there's a great example in Boston, in the North End on Commercial Street, where there's kind of like a 1/2 foot concrete separator divider between like the bike lane and the road. There's breaks in it, so they didn't even have to change stormwater. So in terms of cost, it's super low cost, but it provides that kind of physical separation and dedicated space for people, of all ages and, more abilities to feel comfortable. And then there's other cases where it might be flex posts, or you could even start with, cones and different things to kind of test different configurations. We have it here in Needham. If you've seen the kind of the orange barricades that are out by Town Hall on Highland Ave or in front of Camilla's on Great Plain. That would be kind of like a tactical, testing of an improvement to kind of, see something different. We have it too with our outdoor dining, the use of the concrete barriers, right? So instead of doing a full reconstruction of the roadway to kind of provide space for outdoor dining, actually that's like the best example. It's right in our backyard. You turn the parking lots into outdoor dining, you turn the on-street parking into outdoor dining. And next thing you know, you've just completely changed the look and feel and the use of our public space. So the concept between like quick build bike networks is that you can quickly do it, kind of all the low hanging fruit anywhere where you have excess width. In other cases, you can kind of test out different configurations.
Thank
So
you.
that's exactly, I mean, that's the way when I think of quick build, that's what I think of, right? I think of all the work the communities did to respond to COVID and offer
Yep.
outdoor dining. So I guess the question I have as we bring something like this forward is, I think if I were sitting there as a select board member or, policymaker, is, okay, I get it. Where would I do something? Well, where would I do that? Because I think even about the outdoor dining, which just about everyone said, damn, do this. It's a great idea. Do it fast. And we did it pretty fast. There's still considerations, questions. You lose a
Yep.
park. Is it hard to get around? I mean, even those where everybody wanted them, those are the considerations. So if I'm sitting as a policymaker, I don't know. So, okay, I get it, but what are you suggesting I do? Do you want one all along Great Plain Avenue, all along it? Do you want it up high? What is it we would be doing?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a lot more useful to the climate action plan if we can have something that says we want to get people out of cars because they have short trips, and here are the places where we think you'd have the biggest bang for the buck, because that's what we did with the
Yeah.
it's like, we know that it's the restaurants, right? I don't know how to say that for these things, and I think
Yeah.
that, because otherwise people are going to say, well, what does it mean? Right?
Yeah, they're and so I do think, I guess it's just what level of detail do we want to get into? I mean, there's great cases where communities have asked that question, right? Like surveyed the residents to say like, I would bike here if there was, a bike facility, right? And you start to kind of capture where those short trips happen in one's community and where it would be most effective. That's probably the best because it's actually like community driven and like the user driven versus just kind of a technical, here's where there's space or room. And then kind of the larger network would, require kind of a bike network planning process that would be a combination of kind of technical analysis and also kind of community input.
I guess the question for them is, and for us is, are there some things in quick build that, because the idea of quick build is it's quick, right? But if we're saying, hey, it's going to take a year of just surveying people to see where they should be, that changes the dynamic of how long it takes and whether you should think about a more permanent solution, I guess just something to, again, as a policymaker, I'd be thinking, okay, that's interesting. Are there opportunities to do this quickly, or is this something that has to be part of a much longer, much more comprehensive planning process? I don't know the answer. Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I think Michael raises a good point about the fact that many of us have this view of transportation within Needham Center, especially as congested, hazardous, dangerous, and somewhat wanton, meaning that I just have either been a participant or seen multiple near misses. And so the question I have is a quick build approach the best approach, or is a survey approach with all the major stakeholders then involved and creating a longer term approach a better approach? Again, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that it would still be useful to identify all the important stakeholders that can help make those decisions. And I guess Jackie and Michael and others might even know some of the people who should be at the table for something like that. Yes?
I mean, the reality is it has to be both, right? Because a town like Needham is doing capital construction all the time. Like they're planning out the future of Highland Ave and Great Plain right now for downtown. Those are two active projects that the town has and have been before the select board. So it has to be both, right? It has to be looking at the like permanent, capital plan to be reactive to what's already in the works. Then it needs to be like, what's the proactive plan that we can start planning for and actually do in another, be reactive to what's happening now in the next 5 years, plan for then 5 to 10 years. And then in the interim, what is the quick build work that for smaller dollars, and lower effort could be put in. And then there's the very like tactical that you do it around certain like programming, right? So Rosemary Pool opens, how do you just make it really easy and attractive, over the course of a summer? Or do you focus on a school and trying to like completely change the share of people who feel comfortable walking and biking to school? And just because it's the social behavior, it's not just the infrastructure, right? It's the kind of the community driven peer to peer. And that's where the programming comes in of like needing some capacity to.
So what I heard is 4 pieces now. Well, no, but I mean, this is important to give.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me go back to there's the long range plan, the big thing. That's all that. If Highland Avenue is being looked at, I don't know where we are because we've done a bunch of stuff in the downtown for Great Plain. Then one recommendation is, and I think it's happening, but I don't know, maybe it's not happening to the extent that we think it should for this goal, is ensure that the Highland Avenue, the reconstruction planning already underway, right? It's in the process of being designed and put into the capital plan, has this as an element or as an important element. I'm sure it's there to some degree, right?
Yep.
The idea of bike lane or shared lane, but that would be a recommendation to say for projects that are big projects that are ready to move or in the capital planning process, like a Highland Avenue reconstruction. I don't know what others there might be. We'd like to see this as a very prominent feature because we don't want to lose the opportunity to have those arteries be available for the short-term things. That's one. There's the longer term, do you recommend, hey, a full bike plan, long-term thing? Then there's the stepping back for a moment here to this idea of the quick build. Are there areas in town, or do we think that one of the things they should do is it's worth looking, somebody with DPW, somebody should look at whether we can identify a couple of corridors that could be done to quick build and might make a big difference in, 1 to 3 to 4 or 5 years, right? Because if they're not gonna make a difference for 10 years, you might as well put them in the long-term planning.
Yeah.
The fourth one that you introduced is that, well, do we have some things that happen in town where we could use the quick build ideas for a period, like in the summer? Can we do something to make it easier to get to Rosemary Pool, right? I don't know what else, things like you mentioned the schools as possibility.
So
I think
Webster
that,
Street is
yeah,
perfect.
Carol, go ahead, Carol. And then
So
Nick.
Webster Street is perfect because it goes to the high school, it goes down to Trader Joe's, it goes down to West, that goes to, to the rec center, it goes down close to the library. I mean, and it looks like it's big enough. Maybe a pilot study to start with would be good. Do you think, and also, thank you, Jackie. I actually read through the whole plan. I had time today. I thought it was great. It was really nice to see it. So thank you. But do you think that Webster is wide enough to be able to have a bike lane on both sides? Yeah, I think it probably is. Yeah. I mean, maybe you start with just a pilot study and kind of get people to buy into it.
Nick, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so I'm attracted to the idea of starting with the schools. I read a piece in the Times, I can put it in the chat actually, that was getting people in Central Ohio to do better with their leftovers. Let me see, how do I put the chat? Is there a chat? There's no chat.
Go to
No,
more.
there's no working chat. I wanted to put something in a chat too. There isn't.
It's not there. Yeah, sorry.
I'll try to put it in the email when we're done, but it was an article about Central Ohio that was working on how to get the community to reduce food waste. And it started kind of unpleasantly with guys actually going into people's trash cans and picking out like lots and lots of stuff, and then a certain amount of time later checking the trash cans again and seeing that they had in fact reduced waste. But the way they did that an important way they did that was starting in the schools and teaching kids, about composting and, what is trash, what is compost, and so forth. All I have to say is that, and they did that, they started that by sending a survey to the schools. And I can't remember, this is where I get a little bit fuzzy, whether it was they asked the kids' parents or whether the kids were old enough to answer themselves, how they understood food and how they use it. And I wonder if something like that could be done with something like this, with transportation, with bikes. If there's a way to test with the elementary schools, maybe starting at a certain grade, because I imagine little kids are not going to be riding bikes, but like a sixth grader might. Certainly high school kids might. The idea being, of course, that the bigger picture is if you get the kids to do it, it grows up through the system and it becomes sort of a culture change. So I just wonder if that might be another possible way to find out what might work in terms of a quick build for where we would put, flex posts or, rubber mats or bollards or these different things.
So that work already goes on to a degree, because most of the elementary schools do bike rodeos. They do bike licensing with the public safety, the transportation department, and the principals and the superintendent. All of us are involved in, issues of thinking about how people get to each of the schools. Some schools are obviously walking schools, like Mitchell. Others are much harder. There's been some parent groups who've done done the walking thing, but transportation, biking, because the first job of the school committee and the superintendent is safety. I mean, you don't think about it much because thank God we don't have a lot of bad things happening, but all of that already goes into thinking, bikes and how do we make it easier getting the kids the bike, the little bike licenses and the testing. So some of that stuff that you're talking about already does go on.
So does that mean this would not be something to build upon? Or does it mean it could be built upon to learn more about what would be a good place to put these potential bike paths?
I don't know that a survey would be the way if I were looking at that, what I might do is I would say, so if you think about where kids are most likely, or you might want them to bike, you might want to just say, so of the schools that think about how the kids get there, elementary being one level, and then for this high school's a completely different matter. But maybe the High Rock and the Pollard, because kids come from all over town.
Hmm.
You have to think about them differently, right? Because
And it
Yeah.
could be, it could be initially too much of a leap, right? Just to focus on just kids, right? So another thing would just be like the family, family biking, just outside of school, right? Like to DeFazio Field and to activities and to, friends' houses and, other things. If adding in that school layer actually makes it maybe just too many hurdles for
how
the
much you move the
municipality.
needle with this kids layer, because there's a fair amount that happens already. So are you going to move the needle? I mean, and you could certainly ask the question, is there an elementary school where something like this could really change the dynamic and make it easier for a larger number of kids to bike to school? That is an interesting question, because
Yeah.
that's probably not something that has been thought about among the 562 things principals have to worry about. It's been more about, it's the safety issue, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if anyone's asked the question, gee, is there a school where we think more kids could bike if certain things could be done? I don't know that that's happened.
JP, did you want to say something?
Yeah, my question is really procedurally. We're raising a lot of interesting ideas, right? And this is the group that is obviously going to raise these transportation ideas. And to the extent that we raise things that everyone else is already thinking on, we are not having an impact. So I hope that we're raising ideas that go beyond what is already in the system. And to the extent that we are raising ideas that are going beyond what is already in the system, shouldn't we capture them somewhere in the plan so that, through this presentation of our output, that we can direct these ideas to the respective groups that work on Highland or work on whatever the examples are, right? Because they won't know unless we put this down on paper as part of our deliverable here and say, here, the group that has been thinking about this thinks that these 3 or 4 or 5 quick builds could be the best examples. and
Yeah.
pick 1 or 2 or 3 out of the 5. But somehow we need to communicate that.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I intend to incorporate, I'm gonna ask Jackie, I can't make Jackie, but I'm gonna ask her to addend action 3 to talk a little bit more about these in a more granular way that we just talked about, so that maybe action 3 will have 3 examples, for example, whether we create a off school time pilot, if we create a particular school that might be of interest, and then something else, So I think that, yeah, we should give more granular detail to number 3, and it'll be incorporated into the report. So they know that we at least thought of something more specific than just saying, hey, we need a quick build,
Yes.
And I agree.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what I was getting at too. And it is important, as Jean-Pierre says, to capture these specific ideas, even if they're maybe further out. But
Yeah.
I would say, and I'm not sure you were saying this, Jean-Pierre, that the fact that an idea, everyone has already talked about it, doesn't mean it shouldn't be in here, because that might be the thing we really want them to do. I look at some of number 1 and number 2. Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
everyone's thought that we need to get more citizens into cars, but we need this in there because we would want to say it's one of the most important things to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we
So-
want both. We want the ideas that are, I don't want to call them obvious, but maybe they are, because they need to work their way in the plan.
Yeah.
And then enhancing them with these ideas that either go beyond, because we really want them captured, because we're going to need more ideas as we get further along.
Yeah.
So what,
Jackie,
does everyone, so
go
I'm taking notes as we're talking, so I have it now within it, like action includes 1, developing the bike network, and then I'll add a thing about kind of the longer term view. 2, by quick build implementation. Is there consensus on like a more specific detail that we want to highlight or focus on?
well,
The
I think you
Highland,
could.
I guess the Highland reconstruction, or any large road project that's underway in the planning phases, just to ensure that biking and walking will always be part of those, right? You know this, right? That's the way road
Yeah.
projects are done. What we're saying is, if you've got one like Highland, which is a big artery to get to a lot of places people to get to in this town, is one that we really think they ought to make a special effort to look at what we could do here. I mean, that's the way I was thinking based on what you said. If everybody doesn't want to do that, we don't have to, but
Right.
I
So
just
what
feel
I,
like-
what I wrote down, Jackie, is advocating for making sure that there's incorporation of bike lane and share lanes in ongoing reconstruction plans, and then creating or advocating for pilot or small projects that could vary, which would include either school route or a specific area of involvement at a certain time of year, like Rosemary Pool, or a certain area that gets heavy multi-use, like Webster Street as a pilot. So that was Carol's suggestion. So perhaps we can throw those 3 as just sort of in the pot as examples of pilot projects associated with quick corridors. And then go ahead.
Okay, yep, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and so maybe you can spend some time this week, sort of addending action 3 in that regard. If you want to change it to action 3A and B, you can do that as well. If you want to do that as a sort of a way that looks at specific programs versus advocacy, or what I termed as outreach. So these are mostly programs we're talking about, to be honest with you. These are specific actions that we are proposing with regard to infrastructure. So, and I can help you work on that, or we can go back and forth and clean up number 3 if you wish.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm just breaking this out. This is helpful, and actually it reads a lot better now that I have kind of like it in pieces. The other thing I just wanted to touch on quickly was this point about people to be involved,
Yes.
point people. To me, it's a little bit funny that they're all organizations, and on this one, it says my name. I'd rather it not be my name. It feels like I want it to feel like is it coming from this group? Is this group wanting to be involved? Do we actually want to say like Needham Bikes or some other, association, but
Yeah, I mean, you can put that column M is for individuals who are champions of this process. I consider you one of them, or groups that advocate for it. So you can put down as many groups under M as you like, and it doesn't have to be an individual. And you can take your name off if you're going to just be part of the group, which will be doing it anyway, so you'll be in there. But yeah, if you can expand on M as well, that'd be great.
Where is
Okay.
the, you said M, is that column M? Because I maybe I have an older version. I'm not seeing that.
column
So
M.
column M, if you scroll over to the right, Mike, there's the columns go A through
There's nothing in
M.
the column M of the one I have, so I don't know. It doesn't look like I have an updated version because the last one I see in your note says the 12.4.
Yeah,
On your note in one, the note I have from you on January 2nd, the attachment is the working draft 12.422. I just assumed you'd left the name and updated it. I'm not sure you have, or at least what I got there wasn't.
I'll send you the one that I actually have open right now, Mike.
That would be helpful because I clearly don't have
Just
it.
for clarification, let me just copy that and make sure everyone has that, and I apologize for that. So other questions to Jackie before we wrap this up, because it'll take a little time to make that look nice, but we'll get that done. I think that's going to be obviously an important part of all of this. So let me
And-
see here.
One other thing in terms of groups to work with, probably the neighborhood that we end up, hopefully piloting or something, just because of driveways, that we'd want to include the people who's are on that street, the neighborhood that's on that street as a group that we want to work with.
Great.
Okay, so I'm going to stop on bikes. That was really actually quite helpful. And we're going to move on to action 4 okay, and this is on, sorry, this is, for some reason,
It's not.
Michael, did you get
It's
the,
not letting me, open this file, and it's still got the same name. You left the name 12.4, even though it's a different date. Try to save it to something else,
It
let's
says
see here.
12.4, yeah.
which is not a good plan, but all right. I'm going to try to give it a different
So
name.
that's the one I just sent you, and mine opens to M. So I honestly don't understand why you can't slide over to look at the end of the
Because the
document.
version I have is clearly older, but hold on.
Yeah, the one I just sent you is the one I have open, which goes to M. I am absolutely dumbfounded. Hey, Jackie, can you send him your copy and just see if it makes any difference?
Let me open. I've just opened the new
Sure,
one.
yeah, I'm resaving mine as well.
I don't. Sorry, I gotta get the view has to be set to free some panes or I can't see anything.
Yeah, make it smaller or something. Maybe that's what it is.
It's not.
It should be in there, Michael.
I don't
that I didn't.
No, because
So-
the version that I had previously was not the updated version. This is updated.
You got the, do you have the M there? I sent it to everyone, by the way. So
Yeah.
if you're looking at it and you want to switch over, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to spend just a few minutes on actions 4 and 5. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but I think it's important. EV charging infrastructure is important because if we're going to ask people to adopt EV going forward, people who live at home have less of a problem, but people who live in apartments or don't have adequate charging capability for whatever reason, this is going to be something that we're obviously going to have to work out, typically with assistance from Eversource, because this is a big issue. So we didn't spend much time talking about this, where charging stations might go, or where we should offer suggestions as to where charging stations should go. So I'd like to open it up for a few minutes about a couple, again, like the bike thing, 2 or 3 ideas that people might say would be a good place to start with regard to infrastructure for charging stations outside of people's residential charging ability.
I do
Thoughts?
think you need to add the word infrastructure there because you don't have it under types of action, and it is very definitely infrastructure.
Yep.
To me,
It may be helpful to think not just in terms of one way to do obviously is locations, but the other ways to think about it are things like, okay, so there's the municipal, there are businesses, and then there are our multifamily developments. You know, that might be to say, what can we do to work with the multifamily, you know, the resident condominiums and apartments in the town. You know, it's specific, not in saying which one it is, but there's a specific path you go through with Eversource and with, you know, whether it's a condominium association or a management company to say, hey, would you consider doing, you know, charging stations in here? I would include, if you're, you know, if we're putting some more granularity here, the other one is working with our Eversource on pole mounted charging. Right, because that's a pilot. I think I mentioned it last time. That's a pilot that National Grid, Ngrid is doing somewhere, Framingham or something, where
Melrose.
basically they have transformers. So they put a charger essentially on a pole, and whoever parks near it can use it. Right.
I've also
the-
seen public libraries as places where charging stations are. I was at Swarthmore near Philly earlier last year, and they had 3 or 4 slots that were just for charging. It was the first time I'd ever charged a car in a public place, and it worked. It was only $2 or something. So
I think the way we should think about it is, where are cars parked the longest during the day when they're not at home, right? People go to work or people go to school. So I mean, high school parking lot, you know, the kids arrive there in the morning and the cars are there for a couple hours. Same thing with, like, you know, working places. So, you know, the largest employers have their parking lots. People show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and the cars are there till 5, right? Libraries may be an example where, for the most part, people show up and less than an hour later, they're probably gone again. So I would think about, you know, where are the parking lots in Needham? Train stations is another one, but where are the parking lots in Needham where cars are there for a couple hours? And those are probably the ones that Needham as a town can make an investment in.
but I wonder also, just to play devil's advocate, like, wouldn't you want a parking lot with some turnover so that you could get more cars in and out? Like, so if the town, the lots near the train stations are there all day, that's not much movement for more cars to come in and get charged.
Well, I think you can have a charging station and you can have multiple cars hooked up to the same charging station. And there's a program that runs through and charges different cars based on the time that they are there. But if I drive an EV and I'm going to the library and I'm only there for half hour, I'm not going to bother hooking it up and unhooking it again, right?
For
I'm
level
running
two,
there and
for
I'm not
level
gonna
2
bother.
chargers, you're not going to do that. That's correct. On the other hand, you know, there's a visibility to it. You know, people in Needham, you know, who are driving around in Needham are probably not going to be, as you point out, needing to add 15 minutes of level 2 charging while they're, or half an hour while they're shopping at, say, Roach Brothers, right?
So
that's
I'll play the devil advocate, which is to say, the Action 4 is an excellent opportunity to focus on equity on this, which is to say that people who have their own home are going to have access to adequate charging by and large, like I do. Okay. Whereas people who live in apartments who may have issues financially are going to struggle more. And to keep their cars charged is going to be a lot more effort than for a person like me. And so I like the idea of the getting to condo and apartment and multifamily approach as a way to deal with the issue of not only infrastructure, but incorporating equity into that process.
That's correct.
And so how we do that is another issue, but I think it's a great way to focus on 2 things at once. That's my thought.
And I would say sporting fields, DeFazio, any field where parents are going to be there for at least an hour watching a game, maybe 2 hours, that also is good PR that, and it would be equitable. So if your children, if you live in an apartment and your child, plays sports while you're, you can charge your car. So I would add sports fields.
So this is a question out of ignorance. So are there charging, I'm guessing there are charging contraptions that can charge faster than others. So what is
Yeah.
like the fastest, like I have a
Level
Prius
3.
Prime, like what's the fastest level 3? How long would it take to charge my Prius Prime from 0 to full?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that in this group, but the level 2 and level 3 charging are the basic charging options. Level 2 is a 220 volts, the kind you put in your home. It's the kind that's most prevalent now. That
That's 6
is
hours for
10
us.
miles an hour. That does not, that takes 6 hours to charge a fully electric vehicle.
Right.
If you're just charging, adding 15, 20 miles to say a hybrid, that you can do pretty readily in that. The level 3 charging, which is a much larger infrastructure, is called the fast charging. It's what the Tesla supercharger network does, and slowly others, where you can take a car at 20%, a battery car at 20%, take it to 80% in about a half hour. That's what everybody would love to see. Those are not going to happen anytime real soon in large quantities. It's the kind of thing you were pushing like the Bullfinch to do at their place, and obviously thinking about for the town for things like school buses and other vehicles where you want to get them charged quickly.
So we're talking level 2 at these different places, these different potential locations that we're talking about.
Certainly apartments, and that's perfect for apartments and homes. That's what what we, as Paul pointed out, if you own an EV in your home, that's what you put in. It's not nearly as expensive. A level 3 charging is a much bigger investment. It's for a larger property. You can do a level 2 for between the programs Eversource has and other things. It doesn't take much to put one in.
Yeah.
I guess
you know,
one
Go ahead.
question I have-
go- Jackie.
I guess to me, the question is, are there places where people live in Needham where there wouldn't be chargers associated with where they're parking their car? I mean, parked
Condos
cars are
and
parked
apartments.
93% of the time. So are there places where people live locally where they wouldn't be able to do it overnight?
Condos and apartments. That's basically what
What
it
is
is.
it?
Condos and apartments.
But then
There
I
is
guess the
not-
question becomes like, are there ways to retrofit those places?
Oh,
Because they physically still need to park. If they own a car, they still have to physically park it somewhere at that condo or that apartment.
They have a
So
parking
it's
lot.
more, so to me, the other equity aspect is like, then how do you also support them to have the luxury of like being able to charge it overnight or all day if they work the night, whatever it is, versus having to be reliant to like go somewhere in town versus the opposite of like, if we're attracting people to come work here, do you need it at certain town destinations to support people who don't live in Needham, who come to Needham regularly and want a place to charge? I don't know, just something to think about. Because if physically people already in apartments have to park a car, conceivably you just add a charger where they're already parking their car. You don't need to force them to go somewhere else in town.
No, but that's the point about saying that one of the recommendations is to work with the condo associations and apartment managements to
Get
say
it in.
you should put them in, right?
Yeah.
So that there are some, for some people,
Yeah.
you have 30 spots in the lot. If you have 4, that'd be great, because 4 people can now, who live in an apartment, can now buy an EV and know they can charge, right? There's not a lot. We're not in a Jamaica Plain city where people park on the street. There are
Right.
very few people who park on the street, even if they live in an apartment. That's just not. the way
Yeah.
it works in
But then
Needham,
like DeFazio is interesting because if we're attracting people from across the region who come for soccer tournaments or come for sporting tournaments, you want them to know, oh, I can drive my electric car to Needham for these events and charge it because I need that to be able to get back home.
There's also when you think about some of the establishments or the whether strip malls or not just the businesses, quote unquote, but if you have a parking lot, that if you go into any parking lot in Needham where there's retail, some of those spots are people who are working there.
Yeah.
And so there's an advantage to say, okay, if I drive there and I shop for a half an hour, I don't park my car, but it would be great that somebody who works in that retail establishment can come in and use one of the parking spots, which they're taking up anyway, by the way, to charge their car. So there's different users that you might have in a lot depending on it. And then of course,
Yeah.
the other issue with all of these lots is when you put them in there, if the lot is already full, people will say, well, then will people just park in it who aren't charging their car? But that's more of an operation.
Yeah, Jackie, it's a big thing with parking in terms of, moving vehicles in and out, people
Yeah.
getting enough charge to keep moving. And then
Yeah.
a lot of these charging mechanisms will actually charge fees for people who sit there
Yeah.
and over, so there are
No, I'm-
mechanisms
Yeah.
built into that. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
well aware. It's a huge issue of, how we just think about it as a state transportation department, right? Like,
I
what is
bet.
the role? Because a service center where you quickly get off the highway and, pump your gas and you're on your way is,
Right.
is totally different. I'll send you guys also the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, like federal, that Gabe Klein, a colleague of mine, is heading up, is putting on a Q&A about their strategic plan that they just put together in a few weeks. So I'll forward that along if it's of interest. And that's the whole
Great.
national latest strategy on EV charging and all of that.
And
comes
that's
with it.
another part of this is that with the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the other acts, there's a lot of money and, states have filed their plan. I know Massachusetts filed this plan for how to build out the charging network and use the federal money. So, that stuff is going to flow down to some degree. A lot of it's going to be along the highways, but there is going to be infrastructure money, within cities and towns that may come from that to build out the charging infrastructure.
So working with condos and apartment complexes management and in concert with Eversource is, I think, a first good low hanging fruit for focusing on how the infrastructure of EV charging should work. Other areas like sports fields, library charging, and pole mounting charging all are other areas of infrastructure that can also be incorporated as well. So what I'll do is I'll incorporate all that into Action 4, update that, and then that'll be sent to you in addition to the changes we make in Action 3. Questions?
And you can throw in one, which I know and hope, or well, I should say, I think the zoning group, but you could add it to say, we should be encouraging, maximizing EV charging installed as part of developments in the town through our zoning and permitting.
Like new apartments, you mean?
New
Yeah.
apartments, the office, get everything, all the bills,
Yeah.
any kind of
I was-
multi, commercial.
Yeah, I was gonna
any kind of-
say, this feels more like zoning
but-
regulations.
Well, it is, but you put it in so that when they bring this all
Yeah.
together and they see because I've pushed it on the zoning side too, right? But they just see it that, the people who are talking about the transportation are referencing it. So it helps them see how these things come together. That's more, it's just a little reference so that they see it and they make the connection.
That's good. Thanks, Michael. Let's move briefly on to Action 5, which is a shuttle or shared EV program in Needham. We talked briefly about this at the beginning, talking about developing a shuttle system that would be a fixed program in the short term. And we talked about models that might exist that we could replicate with an EV model. So the Council on Aging, the TripAdvisor, for example, there are other shuttle systems in the Needham area that people are aware of. Do people want to comment on a specific approach or way to get at this as a pilot that would represent something that we could include in our Action 5? Anyone?
So I was just reading, I didn't know this, maybe you all do. The Metro West Regional Transit Authority actually serves Framingham, Natick, and Wellesley. And on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, they shuttle people into Boston hospitals. And so I wonder why Needham isn't part of that group, since we're right next to Wellesley and we're on the way to Boston. So that is a state authority, and you have to apply for it, but right now it's not open to Needham residents. Did anyone else know about this?
Yeah, that may be because I'm trying to think Metro West, we may be out of that service area for that RTA region, if it's a regional transport.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, but that could be. But it's it's a good example. Along with the Newton Caller Ride, Newton has a program where residents can call and get a ride anywhere in town. Wellesley does too. These are two programs. They exist now.
I
in
think
those
the
towns.
community council does that here too.
Yeah, but these are anyone, not just elderly.
Anyone, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so how would would we work or contact or with one of these other programs and then try to create a program that goes with EV? So if Wellesley or Newton has a program, perhaps using that program as a template and converting it to EV would be like one suggestion to consider. Other towns do it. They spend money on these things. It seems that we would be able to do that as well. That sounds like something at least we can refer to other towns that actually do this.
Well, especially towns like us, right near us, that are doing it.
Yeah. So it's kind of a shame that we don't actually know about those things or don't do them. So I think there's probably something we can learn from Newton or Wellesley as a initial start to creating a shuttle program, which I really think we should have in Needham. I've thought about it for a long time and I've never really understood why we don't, So maybe Michael, why don't we have it?
Please, I've been talking about this for a long.
Okay,
we had this little bus that ran around years ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't been able to get anybody interested in the last 10 years to think about it. But you do have, the other pieces of this, I think, as I put it when I originally sent this into you, are one, the organizations like the 128 business camp, I forget what they are. There's a private shuttle that businesses use, and it's run by an organization. It's the 128 shuttle. And a lot of office parks use that. You can tie in with something like that. The other piece of that, in addition to which I think, is to look at our inventory of vehicles in Needham specifically, right? Because we have vehicles that are used by the Council on Aging has vans, schools have vans and buses. There's companies that have them, and they're used for their people. But why couldn't you start to coordinate and say, if there are a lot of multi-passenger vehicles in town, are there a way of extending what they do when they're not used for, what they're being used for? Or
do you think that the Council of Aging, which has their own shuttle program, could either be supported or expanded so that it's not just for older people, but it could actually serve for the public?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would go that far. I don't want to scare them off.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that we have a lot of entities in Needham have multi-passenger vehicles, and no one has ever actually had them sit down and say, are there ways we can make fuller use of our vehicles to get more people into them? That's kind of step one.
Yeah.
The 128 shuttle model, where there are entities that run shuttle programs for office parks and property owners and developers, is another. Anybody can contract with them. It's just something that you could look at. You could theoretically ask 128 shuttle to put a proposal in place to run a shuttle around the town of Needham. Whether that would work or be cost effective, I don't know, but it's one of the ways you would do that. You would ask the question.
So if
It
you
doesn't-
if you
It
have
doesn't have
school
to be
vans-
Needham buying vehicles and hiring bus drivers.
JP, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just another example that I've been thinking of is the school buses or smaller versions of the school buses. If you have vans, I mean, basically between 9 o'clock and 2 o'clock, they're not being used, right? They sit still. So there would be another pool of vehicles that could be used for a public purpose.
Yeah, it's just trying to maximize the vehicles that you have, that everybody has. By the way, a lot of vans do get used in the middle of the day, but school vans anyway. That's another.
Maybe we can use Domino's EV fleet that'll be coming out soon. I don't know if you've seen the commercials, but Domino's is going to EV delivery. And so perhaps if their business is not going well, they might want to use or let us use their vehicles as a way to shuttle people around, if you don't mind smelling like a pizza after you've been brought from point A to point B. I just thought I'd throw that in, okay? All right.
The other thing I would encourage people to look at, there's an amazing podcast called Mode Shift that just came out, and it's part of it highlights VIA's work, VIA, and there's an amazing case study of rural communities that have successfully used these companies to have like micro transit. So we are like dense compared to some of the use case studies, like super dense. And it's really, there's amazing examples from across
Shift?
Massachusetts and the country.
Called Mode Shift is the podcast.
Mode Shift is the podcast. It's 6 episodes. I'll send a link, and then yeah, I'll send a link. It's really interesting. Lots of great case studies, and it's quick and easy to listen to. And a couple Massachusetts people, including Auchincloss, is interviewed in it.
That's cool.
Great. So a couple other points before we get to close to the hour here. So what we'll do, Jackie, thanks, working on 3 to fine tune that and to offer more examples. I'll work on 4 and 5 and fill in the comments that people made. And then what I might ask people to do is for column M, if you will, is to identify either people or organizations that are not listed to include them as stakeholders or players in whatever project we decide to recommend for actions 1 through 5. And so what we'll do is Jackie and I will finish the document, circulate it to you again and to look at and edit, and then send it back to us as it is now due before the 12th. So I'll get that done in the next day or 2. Jackie, I don't know how much time you need, but hopefully we can get that done pretty soon. Final word is I was approached by, I approached and was then again approached by a local dealership for Chevy. They wanted to do a EV demo session in Needham, and they are very interested in whatever program we choose, which would involve demos and examples that would include the new vehicles, truck, EV, and SUVs. And I thought they wanted to do it in May, and they wanted to do it on a Saturday. And I want to put that out there to you as a potential time to shoot for. And that would include not just an EV. To me, I would combine EV with a bike awareness, bike sort of demo thing or something where we take bike sharing and EV promotion together. And so I'll leave it to you, but to think about that. But I do think one output of this committee would be that there would be people like some of you or me who would actually get the ball rolling with an event that we can plan in the spring. JP said, every person we can get to delay buying another internal combustion vehicle and wait and then buy an EV or bike or whatever. I don't want to wait for the consultant to finish their document, which could take X amount of time. I think we need to get moving soon, now. And I think that if nothing else comes out of this subgroup, which is not insubstantial, that we created this document, I think it would be even better if we can create a program that we can actually help organize and recruit other people and work with people in Green Needham that would actually, we can point to in May and say, this came out of our group itself, an actual action, promotion, or whatever you want to call it. So
we've done several of things that are like that, and for Green Needham, and so if there were several volunteers willing to work on it, we could certainly help guide you through, because there's a lot that has to be done. It's not as
no, it's not. But the Chevy guys, they do this all the time.
They do it all the time, but no, it's like you have to work with the town, you got to work with public safety, you got to. There's so much. There's a lot. So, but yes, it's not as simple as turning them on. You'll need a few volunteers to work on it.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely. I mean, it's January and we're talking May. I think it's doable.
Oh yeah. It's eminently doable. But you would, I think, to make it work. Well, I will tell you to make it work. If we can find a couple of people who want to raise their hand and say, I'll work on it. I can do it within, we've done, Green Needham's done some of it. You just need a lead, because it's just a lot of follow-up that has to be done. Working with public safety.
Absolutely. I mean, Michael, I'll be there for this. And then I'm sure I can recruit, several other people.
I'd love to see us do one this year.
Yep.
And in fact, by the way, you do know that the town, the other piece of it, I have to talk to Hank about this, because one of the obligations that the town had in some of their, they have a couple of places that they're doing charging that's been paid for one of Eversource programs. And one of the obligations that came with that was to do something like this. So
Yeah.
that's something we can circle back to.
Good.
I can help you put the pieces together if you have a couple.
I'd love the help because I think it would be a great thing to do, and I think we can do it anyways. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
but-
stop,
but-
stop there. Does anyone have any final questions or issues?
Just a final thought on that. Let's plan that first event in a way that we can repeat it without big effort, because I think we want to do these like demo days every 3 or 4 months.
As
That's-
often as is feasibly possible, you know?
That's a really good idea. And
Yeah.
I think that's, to do that is part of the conversations with the folks that'll be involved, like public safety in the town, or, okay, let's start, this
So
is more
put-
than one off. Let's start thinking
Yeah.
about how we
Put
do
it
it.
on
So
the
it's
calendar.
next time. It's a really good.
Yeah.
Could you just add, not that, Greenium's been involved in all of these, because we pushed them, but I think numbers 3 and 4, you should add them under key partners because we've
Of
been working
course.
on both of those.
Well, I'll add them to all of them, Mike, actually, Michael. I
If
mean,
you
it
like,
really-
go right ahead, but
Yeah,
certainly
sure.
1, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
I think we've made enough noise around number 2 that's going to happen. I don't think you need us on that.
Okay. Well, again, on behalf of the climate committee, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate. When the final document comes out, people on the different working groups will be acknowledged on the document. And so, again, it's people like you who help make this and move this forward. I look forward to working with you in the future on this. And like I said, we'll have a more final document for you within the next few days for you to look at. And I just want to say thanks again, and thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.